review our capital budget priorities and requests. As Josephine said, we do have quite a long list, and so we may have a few more members who are able to join us. Thank you. I see Shirley joining in. Good evening. And so we can just get started with our introduction and discussion. I want to thank all of you, though, for the job that you've taken on and for the role that you're fulfilling in our community board. Your presence and time is appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Jane. So I have prepared as I typically do, a quick PowerPoint presentation, and then I guess we could roll right into some of the proposed new requests that were made following Community Board 10's outreach on social media and our e-blast. Before I begin, I want to say it was the probably, in my recollection, we received the most capital and expense and feedback from our social media posts and our e-newsletter. I mean, I think it was probably, more than 60 emails and phone calls. So it was quite impressive. So we'll try to get through it. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, so Community Board 10, fiscal year 24, that's the fiscal year that we are preparing. We're currently in FY 23. Both the district need statement as well as the capital and expense priorities. So for board members who are new and to anyone in the public who's here tonight, each year community boards are tasked with compiling a district needs assessment, and how we do that here at Board 10 is our executive committee meets before the October general board meeting. The district manager attends the city agency budget consultations. I just completed the meetings that were held today. The district office does outreach to community organizations. We did an e-blast. We did an email notification to community organizations and groups in the district. We received, as I said, over 60 responses from the public, community groups, and agencies. We review NYC open data to note any service delivery trends that we should be aware of. We take a look at the capital and expense priority list of the prior year. We X out those that have been funded and take a look at new requests to see what can be added to the list. And then we hold our public hearing in the month of October. This month will be in person at the Knights of Columbus on the third Monday. And so let me just go really quickly. Agency budget consultations, just a quick overview. NYPD, the most blaring issue is that there is a large vacancy rate of school crossing guards. It's pretty significant. There are vacancies citywide at many of our agencies, but the school crossing guards at NYPD was most notable. There is attrition and retirement at the NYPD in terms of police officer personnel that the police department is working, and there was some information that I'll provide in a few. Discussions about fleet support. The 68th precinct noted will be receiving a new boiler this fiscal year in 2023. The Parks Department provided us with a list of current capital project funding. They had a meeting with our Parks Committee last week, so that is good news. The Department of Sanitation, we learned in Community District 10 needs a new salt shed and is requesting some advocacy. There's going to be a temporary salt shed for this snow season this year, and our advocacy is welcome for a new salt shed. Motorized litter personnel and basket collection is always appreciated. We've been fortunate that Councilmember Brannan has been able to secure additional funding, as well as there were some citywide changes this year. The mayor's office added funds specific for basket collection. The Department of Transportation continued support for resurfacing and street and roadway maintenance. DEP sustainability needs. They too have a high vacancy rate, which we talked a little bit about today that they're working on improving. And they have a new infrastructure recurring flooding area map due to, recent changes in cloudbursts and stormwater surges throughout the city. The Department of Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection, their street enforcement unit, can always use additional officers. The Brooklyn Public Library provided a capital priority list for local branches within Community District 10. So I just want to, yes?
Yeah, can we jump in here when we feel we should? Will we want to?
We could. There's going to be a lot of repetition in it, but you can, absolutely.
Okay. On the school crossing guards, this has been an issue for years, multiple years. And I recall in at least 2 years ago, we had people that had their applications in, but for some reason, we still were never at 100%. Is it that they don't have enough applicants? I get the feeling they're just not making it a priority in terms of vetting the people they have and getting them on board.
Yeah, so at today's budget consultations, we did talk about that. We have, and we'll see in later slides, we have 8 vacancies right now in Board 10. That is the greatest number we've ever had. We've had 2, we've had 3. We've always advocated for more in our allotment. We have 36, we've asked for 40, 41 as we continue to grow. But the borough-wide vacancy rate is larger than ever, and they attribute it to just citywide staffing issues that they're facing. Many of the district managers talked about knowing people who wanted to apply that don't seem to be getting through the process, and also salaries. The job used to be taken by people looking for help with, health insurance. There seems to be a lot more health insurance availability out there. There's been some changes within the Office of Labor Relations from what was being talked about today. I haven't really confirmed it. Conversations about, should we look at, like we did with the lifeguards, increasing the salary, increasing incentives to be a school crossing guards. Right now, the entry level salary is low. It's $15 an hour. Can that be increased? Can insurance benefits be increased? Can vacation days? I mean, things that would attract more applicants.
No, I get all of that, but if we have people that are in the queue, so to speak, why are they not being hired? That's the question. All those things are very nice, all well and good, but if we have people that have applied, why are they not being hired?
Yeah, well, we don't have that many people looking. We have 1 or 2, and maybe there's not enough for a class. I don't know, but I could ask that question, Dean, for sure.
Okay.
Diane?
Yeah, I just want to put it out there that pre-K, we don't get crossing guards in pre-K because they assume that the children are walking with their parents. But children in elementary schools walk with their parents also. We are never allocated crossing guards, and that makes the need even greater. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. So I'll move on, but we'll be talking about this as we gear toward our prioritization. So each year I share with the executive committee Brooklyn's top 10 311 service delivery requests. Pretty much they've remained pretty constant with illegal parking, as top heat and hot water complaints. This year new is mist collection and noise complaints, residential loud music party, which really, looking at the data related to some peaks dealing with some of the outdoor dining complaints that we had, this year specifically. So as it relates to the Parks Department, on 311 open data, I did a chart here from 2019 to 2021, a 3-year calendar year analysis. And, I guess what was most notable and the most common requests that come to the district office are pending tree planting requests. They are up from 2019 at 194 to 230 in 21. Maintenance, facility, garbage or litter. These are calls people make when, they have complaints about anything within our parks. Within the board, 339 in 2019 compared to 475 in 21. And then pending overgrown tree branches. Tree pruning by far has grown to be the number one call of the summer, because many residents are frustrated with, tree branches hitting their homes. A few people have notified us that they've received homeowner insurance cancellations because of overhanging tree branches. The Parks Department's budget is for a 7-year pruning cycle, and honestly, it's not enough for many of the homes, and many homeowners are being referred to being suggested by parks to get private contractors to do tree pruning, which is quite costly and in some cases cost prohibitive to some of our residents. So I wanted to highlight that to you all. So as far as needs, park maintenance and safety requests, each year the board advocates for increased personnel to keep park restrooms open beyond 3 p.m. Because parents and children utilize the parks after 3. Many parents reached out to the district office over the summer to advocate for refurbishing comfort stations. So CB10 interns that we had in the office this year, along with staff and interns from Councilman Brannan and State Senator Granardis's office, surveyed comfort stations in the district. It was quite an interesting experience. Rodent abatement too was a really great concern this summer, specifically at Shorewood Park and Daika Beach Park. So we had some new requests from the public for refurbished restrooms at Shore Road at 79th Street, J.J. Carty Park, Daika Beach Park at Bay 8th Street, and Shore Road Park, which, as Diane knows, was also identified as a New York City Parks need. And they actually put an estimated price tag of $16 million, $10 million for phase 1, which would include the demo of the building, and phase 2 to make a comfort station accessible for $6 million. So interns this summer really delved into this topic of, fighting for better bathrooms in CB10, because they heard some of the conversations from moms that came into the office. And it's actually a citywide issue. So the New York City Council did request an additional $250 million in capital funding in the executive budget to provide more comfort stations. And the Manhattan Borough President's Office and Council Member Rita Joseph both were also working together to pass legislation that would require the city to publish a report on locations where residents can find bathrooms in all zip codes across the 5 boroughs. So it is an important issue. And here at CB10, both in our FY23 preliminary budget register for capital budget priorities and requests for expense budget priorities, we have requested upgrades, construction and enhancements, and we received some new ones this year. So I'll just go really quickly. Shore Road Park at 79th Street. We went, we visited, we took photos. I mean, clearly does need, the sign was broken, some of the locks really was stuck and didn't work. And it really needs, some TLC for sure. JJ Carty Park, it really seemed in need of maintenance. There was a hole in one of the backs of the toilet fixtures, the changing table in the female restroom was broken and tilting, which makes it unsafe. In the male restroom, the sink was unquestionable, missing a faucet. Overall odor and, falling paint was identified by our interns, and certainly they felt, and we did too, could certainly warrant discussion for inclusion in our capital priority list. Shore Road Park, 3rd and 4th Avenue, as I mentioned before, was already identified by New York City Parks. Daika Beach Park at Bay 8th Street, small interiors with a single room with no trash can. The interns, it was kind of outdated and needed some tile work and some capital improvements with lighting. McKinley Park, again, old sinks, really, rusted fixtures. It did have, it was newly painted, but it certainly does need some upgrades. And Millennial Playground, the same. This is on 66th Street and 5th Avenue. It was pretty dark inside. The lighting wasn't the greatest, and certainly could also use capital upgrades. So next, the police department. As I mentioned, just to highlight, illegal parking complaints, block sidewalks, block hydrants, continue to top our list. Noise, residential, commercial, and vehicle. When you put all of those noise categories together, we went from about 2,200 311 service requests in 2019 to 3,817 in 2021. And abandoned vehicles also, we saw an uptick from 323 to 554 in 2021. As far as our expense priorities to the NYPD, CB10 has always advocated for additional school crossing guards and for additional patrol strength. NYPD reported during budget consultation that there has been an uptick in attrition, as I mentioned, but right now staffing at the 68th precinct is 1 deputy inspector, 1 captain, 6 lieutenants, 15 sergeants, 138 police officers and detectives for a total of 161 uniformed personnel. This was 2021 staffing, and it was mentioned today that those numbers may be somewhat reduced because of attrition and retirements, but that's basically the number at the local precinct. They also mentioned that during calendar year 22, this year, 800 police officers were hired. In April of 22, and 582 police officers were hired in July. So they're still, those officers are still going through training in the academy. So as we mentioned earlier, school crossing guards, there were 141 vacancies in Patrol Borough Brooklyn South. I just had to highlight that just to show the significant number of vacancies. Again, I mentioned the 68 precinct, current quota is 36 posts. That's what's allotted to us. We have 8 vacancies. Parents have contacted CB10, pedestrian safety locations, including Ovington Avenue at 7th Avenue. That's southbound, that services PS 170. No longer has a school crossing guard, and we've heard from lots of parents not happy about that. 65th Street and 12th Avenue, Krista McAuliffe, another, difficult crossing location for young students. This is just the impact of the vacancies in the district. So there is a need to organize and determine the cause for the high vacancy rate. We talked, Dean, we mentioned it, perhaps it's additional funding, perhaps there's issues about hiring. I don't really know what the issues are, but it's definitely worth a meeting to kind of grapple, get to the bottom of how we can best advocate, because we really need to do something about this. And that was kind of discussed today by many of the district managers during budget consultations. There were lots who raised this concern.
Josephine, can I just ask for clarification? So
Yes.
The first line in yellow said that there's 141 vacancies in Patrol Borough Brooklyn South.
Yes,
So that encompasses many different community boards, because
Yes.
there's just 8 within our community board.
correct. So
Okay.
that's all of the precincts within Patrol Borough. And I have the breakdown. I just, I was trying to
No
condense the
problem.
slides, but I can absolutely share that with you.
No problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. So also the big topic, as we all know, and we hear at every meeting, is commercial parking at many locations throughout the district. And we hear over and over again from the NYPD that they do not have enough tow trucks or storage once the trucks are towed. This was another issue that was raised today, the need for additional tow trucks, boots, and a storage facility, or thinking outside the box. The NYPD works, I guess, with DCWP on a road tow program where there are, cars that do have license plates that are stored in areas that may be suspicious, may be stolen. The police have to determine who the true owner is. They do contract with the city of New York, does contract with a private company to tow those vehicles. There is no such program with tow trucks. We've asked at our interagency meetings for the NYPD to explore that as an option. So it is certainly, identified as a need here, not only in District 10, but in other commands as well. The Department of Environmental Protection, 311 open data, sewer backups. As you know from our last community board meeting, there were about 35 or 40 residents from 10th Avenue, from 77th Street to 86th Street. You could see here in the data, sewer backup service requests in Community Board 10 increased from 409 in 2019 to 559. and that's a pretty significant jump. Street flooding doubled from 50 service requests in 2019 to 122 in 2021. The New York City Department of Sanitation, just to share, overflowing litter baskets, 8 calls in 19, 39 and 21, and derelict autos, which I just discussed, 283 in 19 and 399 in calendar year 2021. The Department of Transportation, just noting, street conditions, we still get around in the 800s for failed street repairs, potholes, cave-ins, outdoor dining service requests. We didn't have in 2019. We had 126 in 2020 and 197 in 21. Street light conditions, which we had noted in prior district need statements, actually went down a bit from 851 service requests in 19 to 721 in 2021. So expense priorities we discussed with with DOT today. So pothole repairs and advocacy for street maintenance is always welcome. Speed bumps, there is definitely an installation delay and a survey delay due to COVID-19 backup when street surveys were not being conducted. And repaving and resurfacing, a significant amount of DOT's capital funding is allocated towards resurfacing. Right now, CB10 is seeing many of our streets being resurfaced, but we typically, of our wish list, we get a third each repaving cycle. Our streets get resurfaced. So it's something that we typically do advocate for. The Department of Health, I've mentioned it at many board meetings, our rat and mouse sighting complaints, drawing out the rat complaints, 260 in 2019 versus 480 in 2021. And that numbers continues to grow, both, along our commercial corridors, as well as our parks, particularly Shorewood Park and Daika Beach Park. CB10 this year, we did allocate some of our mailing budget to do some educational information, provide educational information to residents along the 5th Avenue corridor where there was a spike in 311 service requests. And it was a good mailing. We partnered with the Bay Ridge 5th Avenue bid, and we got tremendous feedback and lots of information from the Department of Health and many visits to the district office for help. And we were able to provide those informational pamphlets that were also provided in multiple languages. So the Department for the Aging, each year, CB10, we advocate for home delivered meals. The fiscal year 23 preliminary budget did add $2.3 million. Food insecurity continues to be a concern in Board 10. I spoke to our service providers before this meeting. Their numbers have been pretty constant, and certainly advocacy is welcomed for continued support for home delivered meals. So Community Board 10, each year, in our district needs statement, we identify our top pressing issues. And the Department for City Planning provides a listing of different pressing issues that can be selected for advocacy as our top 3. And they range from affordable housing to youth and children advocacy, social services, homelessness. I mean, there's a whole list here. And in recent years, last fiscal year, I should say, our, sorry, I'm having trouble with my, I don't know why that's, so our 3 pressing trends in FY23 were land use trends because of changes with the citywide text amendment, zoning development, illegal conversions. Our number 2 pressing trend, a pressing issue, was parks and open space, because a big portion of our district, 16%, is parkland, and the majority of our capital priorities are parks related. So parks has always been a pressing issue for us in Board 10. And senior services, because 15% of our district are ages 60 and above, and that population projection is expected to grow. So this year, you can't see on this slide, I don't know why, something jammed on my computer here, but I would recommend for consideration, perhaps highlighting in our district needs statement, resiliency and infrastructure resiliency specifically, because of the growth and number of complaints specific to not only 10th Avenue from 77th Street to 86th Street, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but overall the advanced rates of these cloudburst events that are bringing more than an inch of rain at, many of these events, causing stormwater surges, and focusing some attention this year as a board, and Jane and I, we've talked a little bit about this, environmentally taking a look at some of these, infrastructure concerns. We have an aging infrastructure, understanding what some of the needs are, resiliency needs. We've had conversations in the past about paving over front yards, how that all impacts us, and charging our environmental committee. I know Tracy's on the call, with tackling some of these issues, because clearly hearing from our residents, this is a growing concern. So I'm going to stop this share at the moment, and I think go right into some of the emails that we received in response to our, let's see. Here we go. So as I said, we received lots of proposed new priority requests. And what I did was I just threw them on, because today was the deadline to receive them. I just typed them up on this Word document. And Jane, I don't know, maybe we could go through them, and I have them printed out here. And if we want to consider them for inclusion in our capital and expense priorities, this is typically what we do. We do a check off as we go through the list and then kind of plug them into priority order. Is that okay?
That'll be fine. Thank you.
Okay, so new comfort stations. So there were 5 that we've heard from parents. We have 2 on our list already, on our capital priority list, McKinley Park and Russell Peterson. Both of those comfort stations we've advocated in prior years. So this year we have had advocacy for Shorewood Park at 79th Street, J.J. Carty Park, Daika Beach Park at Bay 8th Street, Millennium Playground 5th Avenue at 66th Street, and Shore Road Park 101st Street by 3rd to 4th Avenue. And at Diane's Parks Committee meeting, the Parks Department did identify only Shore Road Park in their presentation as an identified need. A hefty price tag, $10 million for phase 1, $6 million for phase 2. So how do you all feel about including all of these and then working on prioritizing? Dean?
Yeah, I'm fine with including them, but I'm going to go back to something I've said a couple of times over the past number of years. Or let me start with a question. How many contractors are approved by the Parks Department to do Parks Department work? My understanding is a contractor cannot just come in and bid on a job like is done in most situations. The contractor has to be approved first by the Parks Department. Do you know if that statement that I'm making is true, Josephine?
Yes, that's true.
That's true. Okay. Now, this is the problem that I have. I was told by a contractor maybe 4 years ago, who was not on the approved list. He said he tried to get on it, that this is what happens. And I'm repeating, I'm not making the allegation, that there's such a small number of contractors that it's almost like, okay, we're going to bid very high on this job. Okay, $10 million phase 1. We're all going to bid 12 million, 15 million, 16 million. You come in at 10 million, you're going to get the job. Anybody who knows that park building, $10 million to demo that, are we kidding? There is a major problem here. I've said it before. I wish we could get a subcommittee, something to look into why we don't have a better bidding system. How many contractors are approved? Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 7? There's an integrity problem here, in my opinion. And I'm tired of talking about it. Uh-oh, Helen is yelling at me. She said, be nice. Okay. I have to tone it down, sorry.
I mean, I think that certainly could be a Parks Committee topic for sure.
Well, it was noted that, you can buy a home pretty much anywhere in Bay Ridge for a lot less than it takes to demolish and build a comfort station in one of the parks. It's ridiculous. It really is ridiculous. $10 million to demolish and $6 million to build a small little comfort station. There is absolutely something wrong.
Yeah, I really think we have to look into how many contractors are approved. What is the process for being approved? How come we don't have more? There is a major problem. We could get much more work done if it went out for open bidding. But they come up with convoluted reasons why they can't do that.
Agree. Okay. I see Henry has his hand raised.
I was just going to ask whether it's possible to put one item in the report about new comfort stations at multiple places, or if we're going to end up with 7 items all related to new comfort stations in parks.
That's kind of up to us. What we've done in the past is we've done both. Right now, the McKinley Park and Russell Peterson, I think, are 2 separate priorities. We have in the past, said comfort stations in Ward 10. Here they are in priority order and listed them. We can do either or. We have more leeway in capital priorities. I think we can do pretty much up to 50. 40, 50, we have some more leeway. Okay. So I checked them all off as, when we get to the prioritization. So number 1, school crossing guard. These were not in any particular order. I'm sorry. I said number 1, but these were just in the order that I typed them up from the emails that we received. School crossing guard advocacy. That's currently on our list. So it's okay to check off that we want to continue to keep it on the list. I see lots of nodding. So I'll put that down as yes. District-wide tree bed maintenance, including tree guards. So this request, we had, a resident write us and very frustrated that tree beds are not maintained, but the responsibility of the actual day-to-day maintenance is the responsibility of the homeowner. So I don't think this is a capital or an expense budget priority, because the agency will just say it's the homeowner's responsibility. Tree guards we have requested in the past for Bay Ridge Parkway, and specifically because it's a landmark block and has not been a supported capital item.
No, I know tree guards are expensive on our block, 71st Street between Narrows and Colonial. We've got maybe 7 or 8 tree pits. We all individually paid for the tree guards. Okay. It is expensive though, and I'm sure some people can't afford it, but I don't really see that as a capital item.
Okay, so I'm going to X that out. Daika Beach.
At some point, the homeowners have to take responsibility for some of these things.
Right, exactly.
I agree with Dean, also considering the fact that there's just limited funds to go around.
Right.
We have more pressing needs, I think.
Okay. Number 3, Daika Beach Park Playground at Bay 8th Street. This is an identified capital project that was identified by the New York City Parks Department as a need, and it is not on our current list. So do we want to add that? I see some head nodding.
I advocate that we do. we are working on so many of our playgrounds within the district. I think that this one is deserving of a renovation, an update.
Okay. So the next item is reconfigure 92nd Street entrance to the BQE onto Fort Hamilton. I'll be honest with you, it was a lovely email from a resident, but I'm really not sure what he's referring to. I did write back for further clarification. I think this is something that, you know, we may want to get more information on and perhaps have a later T&T meeting about it, unless anyone can, you know, wants to speak to it. Lori, you had your hand raised?
No, I guess because I, like you, don't really understand exactly where they're talking about, because there was some things done, you know, when there was the work done on the bridge.
Right, the
In
MT,
terms
right.
of, so I'm not, I don't think we can speak to it because I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, Chris?
Yeah, I think it was reconfigured already because they made it into 2 lanes from
Yeah,
96
no.
to Fort Hamilton. So it eased most of the traffic going into Fort Hamilton and 7th Avenue.
Right.
So,
And yeah, there was some refurbishments that were done there, and you're right, there was the expansion. So I don't know if they're unhappy
Yeah,
about the expansions. Like I
it needs
think we
more-
need more info, and I
Okay.
agree.
Okay.
Maybe a future meeting if they want to put a presentation together. So we received, the next 2 were regarding bicycle lanes. One was a request to eliminate the protected bike lane on 7th Avenue Service Road. I do think that, you know, we may want to have the Department of Transportation at some point speak to if there are issues and concerns about, you know, the protected bike lane. We did have a pedestrian fatality on Ovington and 7th Avenue this summer. And, you know, that is a concern. You know, I don't think it's a bad thing to take a look at, you know, bike lanes that have been installed to make sure everything is okay. But again, I don't think this is a capital priority. I think it's probably more, Jane, if you agree, or if anyone else wants to talk about it, going to committee.
Why do they think it should be eliminated?
Because it's underutilized.
I would be for leaving it just the way it is.
Yeah.
The bike lane should be protected like that.
I agree. And I think that, I think there are many people who, you know, who do utilize it. And I think that, certainly, you know, this board supported that protected bike lane on 7th Avenue. Again, I'm just sharing all the emails we received.
Yeah, no, I think we should continue supporting the protected bike lane.
Yes.
But circling back to what you said, Josephine, one of the things we had talked about with DOT was to give us some data and feedback on how things are going, and you know, what they had to share in all the bike lanes that have been put into our neighborhood. It is part of a larger citywide program. You know, it is not something just specific to Community Board 10. This is part of a citywide program to make the boroughs connected and to connect the different community boards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is a, you know, again, there was a city council bill that was passed with real, you know, threshold requirements for protected bike lane inclusion citywide. And I know the Department of Transportation that is funded and that is moving forward citywide, and more bike lanes protected bike lanes are being added. So that is certainly positive news. Lori, did you have your hand raised?
I did, but I didn't. Thank you. I took it down.
Josephine, with number 6 there, to add protected bicycle lane on 4th Avenue, 65th to 101st, is that due to the differences between what's in CB10 and CB7?
Yeah, so yes, in some of those
Yeah.
emails, they had asked for continuation from Sunset Park into Bay Ridge. And again, as we mentioned, DOT is working on protected bike lane plans citywide. As far as 4th Avenue, that request was made. I think we received 5 emails requesting that. It is not a capital expense priority because it is funded. I spoke to during DOT budget consultations today. There is funding allocated in the budget for bike lane studies, street safety studies, etc. Lori, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, so I think that, that doesn't really belong in our budget because, even years back, the city's budget, they have fully funded this. They have, provisions in place. They have to add a certain amount of bike lanes per year. They've got a goal. And it's really, I think, a more citywide plan because they're looking at it on a grander scope so that they can make all of these lanes contiguous. So I don't really think that it's something we need to ask funding for because I think the city's already funded it.
Okay. All right, great. So I'll move on. So the next item is 81st Street at 5th Avenue. So this location has been identified on New York City DEP's flood map. And we received an email requesting that Community Board 10 advocates for either a new sewer system or DEP to investigate how to handle drainage issues at this intersection, which floods very badly during heavy rain events.
Do we get complaints from there, Joe? Because that's not on the list that we currently have.
It's not on the list that we currently have. You are correct, Dean. But this year with those heavy cloudburst events, we had, because it's right on the corner of the district office, we had many, many, many visitors who showed us pictures of, it's incredible to see the entire area is flooded, and many of the homeowners on 81st Street, one of our board members included, continues to get terrible sewage backups as well on 81st Street between 4th and 6th Avenues. Lori?
When I do think that, I think the flooding issues are really important. I agree with your and the chair's identifying, sort of this resiliency issue / infrastructure issue as an area that we should put funds toward. I have a question about the New York City DEP flood map. I don't know, maybe I'm ignorant, but I didn't really know about it.
Well, so that's why you didn't know about it.
I know,
yeah.
But do you, Joe, have you played with it? Do you know if we have a lot of areas in our district that are now on this flood map, and how bad do you have to be to actually get on the map?
Yeah, so today when we talked about this, because we met today with DEP, I really think we need a presentation on this. There are some areas, it's kind of an elevation map. I think it's based on elevation and 311 service requests, which we know data is great, but it doesn't tell a whole picture, right? Because many people, let's face it, do not call 311. So DEP is looking at clearly, following Ida, has really begun to focus on storm sewage, surges throughout the city, especially with the loss of life in Queens, the number of basements and other people who were impacted for Ida, and they just hired a new the new commissioner of DEP, which he just started, is really focusing on resiliency. And so I think it is important that we as a board understand what the impacts are here in the community district and advocate as best we can and open the dialogue with residents in the community that perhaps have not been, vocal about it and have not, reached out to 311, have just been dealing with it quietly. I do think it's an important area for us to focus on this session for sure.
But Joe,
Okay.
when they're talking about resiliency, I know there's about 5 areas that have been identified for some type of construction of barriers to prevent flooding into Lower Manhattan, into Jamaica Bay. There's 4 or 5. Is that what they're talking about? Or they're
No.
talking about the day-to-day issues that we have?
Yeah, well, they're really talking about now is, stormwater, because we have a combined sewage, system. When you have a heavy rain event that overflows and that's forced into people's homes. And they're, they shared a link today with us on, steps that 1 and 2 family homes could do to safeguard their house, their backflow valves, and they're all different types of, educational information that they're putting out there on their website. I think that this specifically is relating to infrastructure and how the underground, underground tools, the sewage pipes, when they're overflowed, how they backflow into residential houses or cause street flooding. This is not the sea level surges that we got in, say, Sandy, or, I would make those 2 separate, resiliency issues that the city
Right.
is tackling.
Okay.
Tracy, our environmental chair.
My question actually would, like you ended up answering a little bit, but I would really like some clarification on what the criteria is for that NYC flood map. Especially, like, are they taking into account the age of some of these systems in these areas, like beyond the topography? Like, what is the criteria?
Yeah, I think topography, again, as a layperson and trying to understand what, because he just mentioned this in response to a question today, has to do with, how elevations, high elevations feed into low elevations that causes, certain streets to flood. And so if you identify those and take a look at those, infrastructures that continue to flood, you can focus in on, trouble prone areas. But again, I am not the expert by any means. So I think we should have the experts here. And there are certainly lots of advocacy groups in the city who are out there spreading, educational information to New York City. And that might be something too that we want to, take a look at. But in the meantime, we have 2 areas where residents, were vocal to our office this cycle. One was 81st and 5th Street. And as you see in the second request, we had over 50 emails. I actually lost count of how many emails we had. I did keep a list though, by address, did provide them to the Department of Environmental Protection for the extension of new sewer lines on 10th Avenue from 77th Street to 86th Street. And as many of you know, 10th Avenue did see a capital sewer replacement project back in 1999. I went back and pulled the records from the Community Board's district office. That project was a $7 million project from 63rd Street to 77th Street that enlarged the sewer, pretty significantly, and it stopped at 77th Street. I have no idea why that was at the time, but residents are asking that the completion of that project continue to 86th Street. Lori?
I just have a question. I see these people are calling in and, or emailing and saying, hey, we need a new sewer system, or we need this new sewer line to be extended. But does DEP do, any sort of, like, how we do a study with, DOT, if we want a light,
Yes.
traffic light or something, to really ascertain what the issue is and, how to handle it, so that if we make a capital, I'm just curious, because if we make a capital request saying, hey, we want a new sewer line, and they look at it and say, oh, you don't need a new sewer line, it's, the decay, it happens to be this sinkhole. You know what I mean? Can we make it a little broader so that, our request is maybe to study it and put in the new sewer if needed, but you know what I mean? I just don't want to turn down because they are pedantic about it and say, oh, it doesn't need a new sewer line, it needs something else.
I will have more information on Friday, because we did meet with DEP last year on this, and the study was requested, and my understanding was, underway. I mean, if you ask residents who are grappling with this. They are like, forget the study. We are dealing with raw sewage, garbage in our homes now for 20 years, and we don't want, a study. We need this done like tomorrow. But DEP is going to provide an update to us on Friday afternoon about where they're at. And yes, you are correct, Lori. There is always a study first, a TV of the sewer, of the sewer line, a response to, there's supposed to be, each individual 311 service request is supposed to have, a DEP person go out there and take a look. And certainly there was a spike specifically here on 10th Avenue. But that, I'll know more on Friday as to, what the study concluded, or where we're at in the study.
Okay, thanks.
Just,
Diane?
yeah,
Yes.
just to add to that, I think that DEP is somewhat aware that it is problematic. The flooding, the sewage backup is problematic in that area because they are partnering with Parks Department on some of the projects that were proposed. And they want to install these kind of catch basins underneath the asphalt of playgrounds to collect excess water, that the sewer
Yes.
system can't really handle.
Right, capturing stormwater is really
Yes.
important, yes.
And so I think that they are well aware of the problem because the first project that they are considering this for is by Russell. No, is it Russell Peterson? No. What's the one by 201?
Right, it's by Daika Heights Intermediate School, the
Right.
the new Madeline Brennan School.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So I think that they're well aware of the situation. So hopefully
Now that's Patrick O'Rourke, right? Patrick O'Rourke.
Patrick will work. I knew it was somebody's name.
Yeah.
So hopefully they will realize that this is, a real need in that part of the community.
Okay, great. Sandy.
Yeah, Josephine. I think DEP knows that there is a problem here. I don't know why they stopped at 77th Street and didn't just go all the way through to 86th Street back then when they were first doing this project. But my parents' house, which is on the corner of 78th Street and 10th Avenue, they've owned the house since 1977, and I can tell you that year after year, sewage water has been coming into the house. And the past storm that we just had, my mother wasn't at the house, and I kind of cringed before I walked into the house, and some water had gotten in, but it was the least that I've ever seen it. The sewer system on 10th Avenue has been a problem and is a problem right now, and I think we should prioritize and move this up because a lot of people, and we heard at the last board meeting, a lot of people are being affected by this, and we should try and do everything in our power to try and do this so that the sewer system is what it is all the way to 86th Street.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move along. So we'll put that down as a check mark, yes. Parks pruning, we have on our expense list. I think definitely we should continue to keep it on. So I'll put a little check mark there. Additional, I'm sorry, lighting on Shore Road bike path. We received an email. It is currently number 31 on our capital priority list. So that's already on, so we could, keep it on. I see a lot of nodding heads, so I'll move on. Number 11, water fountains along Shore Road bike path. That is a new request. It is not currently on our request. I think we had it on our list maybe some years ago. We took it off because the Parks Department said no. But we have a renewed request. Lori?
I think I remember when we were talking about the refurbishment of the that bathhouse in the park. They were saying that in order to get water over there, it's, you know, a very big project. And I think that considering we've seen the numbers on just demolition, in order for them to run all the plumbing all the way, you know, over to the other side of the Belt Parkway, to have water fountains, I don't really think that that's something that's going to be remotely feasible, but it was something that was considered when they did those meetings about the whole refurbishment of that whole area along the Belt Parkway.
The Greenway.
Yeah, and people putting their input on that. So if that project ever gets underway, I think it may happen, but for now, you know, considering we've got people whose basements are filling up with water, I think maybe,
Okay,
you know, if
All right.
we do it, I would say it goes very low on the list. That is my suggestion.
okay.
I don't even think it should be on the list. Everybody has a water bottle today, you know?
Okay.
And until there is water on Shore Road, because right now there is no water, it would be a prohibitively expensive project.
Right. Okay, all right. All right, so I'll move along. We received a renewed request for refurbishment of the 76th Street Step Street for new drainage as the steps flood during heavy rain. It's currently number 10 on our capital priority list. Bay Ridge Parkway between 4th and 5th Avenue, tree guards is currently number 28. The agency has said no. I don't know how you feel about leaving it on or taking it off. But we did receive a renewed request from the block. DEP catch basin cleaning contract. So in some of the emails, residents said DEP needs additional funds for cleaning catch basins more regularly. I raised this at today's consultations with DEP. They said they do have regular cleaning and identified in risk categories, certain catch basins. They used to be required to do, you know, do a 3-year reporting on all the catch basins in the city. They're no longer required to do that. But we did hear at our last board meeting from residents who lived on 71st Street and Narrows, I believe, that when their street began to flood, they went into the corner catch basin and they pulled out T-shirts from Zavarian, you know, so that were kind of old and they'd been there for a while. So I don't know if that's something that we, you know, want to advocate for. I don't really have specific information on what the budget is now and what it could be increased to. And then
I think it is important.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Important
Doris.
expense item that should be. I think it's an important item and it might alleviate flooding in many areas.
Okay. And then next is additional rat abatement resources. It's already on our capital list, both for Parks Department and both for regular. So we've already advocated for it. We may want to bump it up considering all of the rat complaints. Agency request, the Department of Sanitation noted today that our salt shed in BK10 needs to be replaced. So they're taking the old one down. And when we ask agencies if they want to, you know, if they need anything that we should advocate for, this was on the list for a new salt shed in CB10. And the Brooklyn Public Library sent over needs for Daika Library for exterior windows, exterior and windows, interior renovation, and initial outfitting. And at McKinley Park, a request for interior renovation of the meeting room. And then I wanted to just note to the committee that last year we bumped up gardener requests, and because we had one gardener in CB10, and in the Parks Committee, it was reported that we now have 0 gardeners, which is unbelievable. And that concludes my list.
Unconscionable.
So how do we feel about the salt shed and the library? Should we add those?
Where is the salt shed?
So the salt shed is outside of the BK10, BK7 garage, which is on 2nd Avenue in the 50s, I think, like 55th Street,
I think 52nd Street.
52nd Street. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine adding the public library, and with the salt shed, if we don't add it, they're still going to do it, aren't they?
I think eventually, right now it's temporary. I do think so eventually, yes.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't sanitation kind of handle that? Like,
Yep, okay.
so, I mean, I agree with Dean on that.
Okay, all right, so I'm gonna stop this share. And now I'm going to bring up our favorite capital. Okay. Okay. Okay, team. So this was the list that was submitted last year for FY23. And what I did was I kind of, marked up this list to make it easier for us. So currently our number one capital request is for immediate study of the Bell Parkway infrastructure to address possible undermining caused by breaches along nearby Shore Road Promenade and the bicycle path. The Bell Parkway is an important thoroughfare, and a study should commence to determine if drainage infrastructure is needed. And I don't know why I'm having trouble with this, but I'll read up my paper version. The request cannot be funded in FY23. Please resubmit in FY24. So do we want to keep this on?
Keep it on.
Keep it on, okay. Do we want to begin prioritizing now? Do we want to keep it at one, or do we want to talk about, just go through the list and then?
Let's go through the list, because I have something that I want to make number one, which I think we're all going to agree on, but let's wait till we get there.
Okay, so number 2 is Shore Road Promenade. To address recurring serious cave-ins, we really need an engineering study, work on the outfalls. There was $7.6 million in funding, which Diane, I mean, I wasn't at your Parks Committee meeting, but I understand really is a Band-Aid. But nonetheless, funding has been allocated to do some repaving and some temporary repairs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So do we want to keep this on, even though we had some funding?
Keep it there.
Okay. So number 3, the good news is the Bay Ridge Center for Older Adults funded. They received, they're going to be opening a new center on Bay Ridge Avenue off of Shore Road. So we're going to take this off the list.
Beautiful.
The next item are new sewers. So last year, we kind of, as Henry was mentioning, this was an example of how we organized multiple locations. So stormwater management following Hurricane Ida, urgency for sewer infrastructure, upgrades, Narrows Avenue at Colonial Road, Bay Ridge Parkway to 85th Street, 10th Avenue, 77th Street to 86th Street, Bay Ridge Parkway, Shore to 3rd Avenue, 13th Avenue, Bay Ridge Avenue to 79th Street, 11th Avenue, 62nd to 72nd Street, 12th Avenue from Bay Ridge Avenue to 79th Street, and 70th Street between Shore Road and Narrows Avenue.
So
So
I have a recommendation here.
Okay,
And I think we'll all be in accord on it. I recommend that we take 10th Avenue, 77th Street to 86th Street out of this request, move it up to our number one priority as a separate item.
okay. Are we all okay with that? Make that number 1?
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
I agree with that, Joe. I think maybe we should phrase it a little differently, seeing as their response was that this request is not recommended for funding. I think maybe we should say it a different way, because they apparently think that whatever we said before didn't
I think
require their attention.
okay,
I think
Yeah,
one of
so-
the reasons they don't recommend it is because it's so broad. we're taking one specific avenue, 10th Avenue, and we're saying this is our number one priority.
Right, so we
Whereas
can,
Yeah.
here, as number 4, it's a very broad request, and
Yeah.
each one of these will probably, require separate funding.
Yes, I agree with that. I was thinking instead of maybe initiate design, it sounds a little broad. I think they need to know that this is immediate remedial action that needs to be taken rather than initiate a design, which sort of sounds like a think tank possibility. So I don't know, maybe if we can punch up that language.
okay, immediate
agree,
remedial,
yeah.
emergency action to address,
Let's ask for the
Significant
upgrade as was done at, up to 77th Street.
Right, do we tag it on as
Okay.
being part of that, the work that was done up to 77th Street
Yep.
in, what was that, 2016, you said?
no, 2000.
2000, I'm
19.
sorry. In 2000, that was not completed, leaving the residents with sewage backup issues.
For every rain event.
Right, for every rain event. And my other question with the listing, you had mentioned in one of the other, in our other preview, 81st Street and 5th Avenue, does that fall into the grouping with the others that were listed?
Yeah, so maybe for the other one, what we could do, and I'll just throw this out there, is we could change the language on that as well. That these are locations within Board 10 that have reported to our office recurring sewer backups during heavy rain events that require immediate study, some type of language to that degree.
And I think that it's necessary to emphasize that it's sewage that is
Sewage, yes.
backing up. I mean, that is the key. It's not clean water.
Right, yeah, storm sewage. Yep, okay, Tracy?
Well, I was going to recommend also maybe removing Hurricane Ida in there, because this is a widespread problem that is ongoing. It's not due to one singular event.
Yes.
It indicates that, or it insinuates that it's because of Hurricane Ida, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, so last year, right after the storm, I mean, it really did renew the urgency when we had that loss of life. But yes, I agree. So we'll take that out and I'll rework that language. Perfect. Okay. So then we'll add 81st and 5th Street with new language to number 4. Okay. Let's see, reconstruct streets. There are 2 identified street locations in Daika Heights that may be in need of trench restoration or capital improvement. Bay Ridge Avenue at 12th Avenue and 13th Avenue between Bay Ridge Parkway and 76th Street. And DOT said, can't do it this year, try it next year. Tracy?
I would like to keep that on and
Okay.
resubmit it.
All right, perfect. All right, the next is the same. We separated them out. These are Bay Ridge locations. So we had 96th Street between Shore and Marine, which was repaved this year. It was resurfaced. So I guess we'll take that and we could take that off the list. But the next street is 87th Street between 3rd and 4th Avenue. So it was the same response. So I guess we could keep that on as well.
Yes.
I think we should keep it on. I think that having, trench restoration is very important. And it's just, exacerbated by the rains because, things are caving in because the soil underneath is being washed away.
Correct. I agree. Okay.
Josephine, may I
yes.
just ask, when we had number 4, it mentioned Narrows Avenue. Was that the area of Narrows Avenue that was brought to our attention at the last meeting as well? I
It
wasn't
was
sure.
good question. No, Jane. So this is Bay Ridge Parkway to 85th Street. The resident who came to Board 10 was on 71st Street. And
Okay.
then,
So there may be some of the other data, because that was my other question. Like you mentioned about how our flooding complaints have gone up more than 100% from 50 to over 122 or something like that. A much higher number of complaints for flooding. I don't know where those calls are coming from.
yeah, the biggest increase is 10th Avenue. I
Okay,
did look at the data, the big increase, and those that are on this list are notable, Narrows and Colonial.
right. Okay, so just if we can, because there seems to be, these other locations that were brought to our attention that we just want to be able to include.
You know what, we could broaden that to to 71st Street or to 70th Street. I could
Well,
look at the data and what do you think? Dean, you live there.
Yeah, on 71st Street specifically,
Yeah,
the only time I've seen that flood, quote unquote, meaning it went up to the sidewalk level, is when the grading was blocked.
okay,
Over the years, at least, I'm gonna say once or twice a year, I go down to the corner, I clear off whatever's on the grading. Most of the time, I just shove it down into the sewer and it goes wherever it goes. And
Right.
once that grading is clear, there really isn't a problem.
right.
That's my observation.
Okay, I think it really does need to be,
And again, homeowners have to take some responsibility once in a while. Go out and clean the grate.
yeah. Tracy? Oh, no, okay. You just had your hands up still. Okay, so I'll move on.
Wait a minute. One
Okay,
second.
okay, Doris, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When we had discussions about possible construction on Colonial Road between 89th and 90th, there was serious flooding concerns there too, and we don't seem to be addressing that.
Number 6.
Remember
Okay,
something
so that's going back to number 4. So Colonial Road, yes, so that, you're right, Doris, that was raised by residents at a meeting of the Zoning and Land Use Committee about significant flooding during heavy rain events. Okay,
right?
so I will look at that data and I will plug those numbers in and reach out to those residents, right? They didn't respond to my outreach email, but this goes to 85th Street. You're right, they said it actually goes up to 90th Street. So I can make that
Right.
amendment on that. Okay, thank you, Doris. Okay, now moving along. Do you remember we used to do this in the conference room? It was so much fun with all the blue paper. Okay. Number 7, John Paul Jones Park, also known as Cannonball Park. This was identified by New York City Parks as an identified need. It is currently ranked 7th. We upgraded this last year. The paths and benches have deteriorated and are in need of replacement. Also, water service needs to be repaired. There are no operating water fountains. So I guess we'll keep that there. Okay, thumbs up. I see. I'll keep moving. Restoration of Shore Road perimeter sidewalks. Rehabilitate the hex block sidewalks along Shore Road Park from Shore Road 72nd to 84th and 86th to 97th Street. And Diane, I read your report. I saw the New York City Parks Department has also identified this, and another job that seems crazy for replacement of sidewalks at like $500,000 a block or something like that. But I was happy to see it made the list.
It was very nice. We're getting gold pavers.
Yes. Okay. No, but it really is needed. The sidewalks there are just terrible. Next item is Leif Erikson Park Lower between 3rd Avenue and Ridge Boulevard. Neighbors complain about the disrepair of this portion of the park, which has never been refurbished. There are currently only 6 antique light poles, and many residents at the Bay Ridge Towers have complained about the pathways, overgrown conditions, and extremely poor lighting and crumbling pathways. The parkway is underutilized in an area that is in need of additional parkland. And Parks Department's response was, oh, we have no money, give it to your elected officials. But I believe we did upgrade this last year. Oh, Henry, that's right. Henry, your hand is raised.
Yeah, we did kick this up last year. I was going to ask if there's a way that we can get this, to get the Parks Department to do a study like they did for the 2 items above this, where they actually identify dollar amount of what it would cost.
Yes, I can ask them for sure.
It would probably be somewhere in the vicinity of maybe $15 million or something.
I will do that, Henry. I hope I'll have it before the October board meeting for you, okay? All righty. I've lost my place. Okay, moving along. 76th Street, Step Street at Colonial Road. The Step Street is in poor condition with broken steps and inadequate broken railing. Actually, the steps and the railing, have minor repairs were made, but the complete restoration is needed, similar to 74th Street. The steps do overflow during heavy rains, making the Step Street unsafe to traverse during, heavy rain events. So, shall we keep this on? We did get another request.
Yes,
Keep it on.
Okay, moving along. McKinley Park repairs to Comfort Station, provide handicap accessibility. So I guess this is the time when we could ask that question. Do we want to make one priority agenda item as comfort stations in the district and list them all? Or do we want to keep them individual?
I think we should keep them individual, Joe. That's my
Okay.
recommendation.
Okay,
I'm
So
just,
if we do
I'm
that,
just afraid if we put them all together, the price tag will be so high that they'll say no to it.
okay,
exactly right, Sandy.
okay. So the next item we X'd out because it was funded. Spring of 2024. Next is Narrows Botanic Gardens. They have requested, they're an organization in the district. They've requested DEP establish an oyster garden alongside the shoreline. And DEP came back to us and said further study is needed. And I believe they're coming to an environmental committee meeting this month to do another presentation, hoping to get DEP on board. Sounds like a pretty cool project, and they're very enthusiastic about it. So shall we keep it on?
Absolutely.
Okay. Next is number 14. CB10 advocates for capital improvement investments to modernize Owl's Head wastewater treatment plant. Tracy can certainly share that there are a number of projects going on and still more work that needs to be done. We've had as a policy to maintain advocacy for capital improvements at Owl's Head on our list. Okay, no questions. I'll keep moving. New perimeter sidewalks along Daika Beach Golf Course. Park said they don't have the money. So it's still needed. We'll keep it on. I'll keep moving. 3 remaining ball fields at Daika Beach Park. Parks did identify this as a need. They gave it a price tag of $11 million. Next is the complete rehab of the Shorewood Park at 95th Street. That was also identified by Parks as a need. I didn't write down the price tag, but I'm sure it was very expensive. Complete rehab of Shorewood Park at 74th Street. There are some drainage issues there, and we've received advocacy in the past for new dugouts. I'll keep going until somebody stops
I thought
me.
Bavarian was supposed to be maintaining that.
Yeah, they do the day-to-day maintenance at that field, but this is the refurbishment of the drainage system, which
Oh,
is, yeah, a little bit more involved.
Because I thought they
Okay.
put in the,
You know what? I walked there this summer and it was so dusty that the fire department was there bringing water in because there was so much dust that was coming up as the kids were playing. They actually had the fire department hose down the field. So they really do need water source there for sure. Number 19, Leif Erikson Park ball field, 67th Street and 6th Avenue are in dire need of restoration. The ball fields are in poor condition and utilized by local leads. Against Park said they don't have any money. Tennis courts refurbished at Bay 8th Street, Leif Erikson and Shore Road Park. Those are 3 remaining tennis courts that have not been yet refurbished, and we continue to advocate for them. Next is the combined sewer outfalls infrastructure along Shore Road Promenade from 69th Street Pier to Bay 8th Street to determine if upgrades are needed. I do believe that the CSOs are being looked at.
Yeah.
As part of the long-term planning, that was the response. So, I don't have a dollar amount yet, but I do, I do believe these are being looked at as part of that, project. So I guess we could keep it on until, we learn of the funding amount. Next, is the comfort station. Initiate an engineering study for a placement for a comfort station on the Shore Road Promenade. Residents, especially seniors, have requested an accessible comfort station along the Shore Road Promenade. So, we could change this and just replace this with the, one of the comfort stations that are on our list.
Right, and this location, I think, goes back to where Lori was mentioning about the feasibility and the location that we had been given some feedback
Right,
about how challenging
it is,
that
yes.
was going to be.
Okay, so I'm gonna etch that out and then just make a note that we're gonna add in comfort stations on the list.
For further consideration under the Greenway project.
Okay, perfect.
Good.
Okay,
Excellent.
next is Shore Road Parkfield at 79th Street, which is labeled field number 3. Next, 24 is complete refurbishment of Daika Beach Playground. So this playground is 14th Avenue at 86th Street, and then we have the other one that was identified as a need by the Parks Department as the one on Bay 8th Street. So there are 2 playgrounds at Daika Beach Park, one at Bay 8th Street and one at 14th Avenue.
Oh,
So those would be 2 separate requests.
Okay,
Okay, then moving down, complete refurbishment of Leif Erikson Park between 5th and 6th Avenues. Park says they don't have the money. A new perimeter sidewalk, lots of complaints from seniors here to replace the uneven hex blocks around Leif Erikson Park on Fort Hamilton Parkway and 8th Avenue from 66 to 67 streets. Next is native planting along Shore Road Promenade adjacent to the Belt Parkway, arterial highways. Again, this was submitted by Narrows Botanic Gardens for consideration. 28, tree guards are needed. Oh, I'm sorry, Henry. I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. If we could go back to
Yes.
how bad are the conditions of the sidewalks around Leif Erikson Park? Because I don't go up.
Yeah, so I live near there and it's pretty bad. I mean, the corner of 67th Street and we have 2 seniors who come in, Henry, quite often about it. And I do have photos I could share with the executive committee. There were sections that are pretty bad and uneven.
I was just thinking, given how high the repaving the hex box on Shore Road was on this list, that maybe this is something we should bump up.
Okay. Okay, I agree. Everyone else does. I'll make a note. We could bump that up.
okay.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go back to Narrows Botanic. So Narrows Botanic did a presentation before the board, I think it was last year. And they are renewing this request too. They feel strongly about native plantings, especially for absorption and resiliency. Henry, do you have another question or that was from before? Oh, okay, okay. Oh, so we're now at 28, tree guards needed along Bay Ridge Parkway between 4th and 5th Avenue.
I think that
And
should be taken out.
taken out, yes, it was not recommended for
Right.
funding.
No.
Okay. So I'm gonna remove 28. So next is Comfort Station at Russell Peterson. We said we would keep that. Number 30, Daika Beach Park has a heavily used barbecue area. Polly Place off 14th Avenue. So we did some work on this summer following some complaints. And the Parks Department did change signage in this area. And it was requested by community residents now not to expand those areas, just to keep it. And it's been
Right.
pretty good. So It's up to you, or maybe we should remove this at this point since the issues there seem to be resolved.
I would remove.
Resolve, take it out.
Okay.
Mhm.
31. Solar lighting for the Shore Road bicycle path. We received this request again this year. Last year was submitted by Bay Ridge Cares. This year we had 2 residents who reached out and wanting to see lighting. In the past, the thought of installing lighting required electricity, but with advances in solar lighting, many feel this can be dealt with. And Park said they agreed, but they just don't have the money. So I guess we could keep this, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
32 was funded, the 8th quadrant of Daika Beach Park. 33 was identified as a park's need, Massimillo Memorial Basketball Courts. And 34 was funded. 35, a district-wide curb contract. Each year whenever they do paving, we always get requests because DOT knocks the curbs, people have old curbs, the city is responsible for curbs, and we have not received a curb contract in many, many, many years. DOT supports it, but doesn't have funding. So if we like, we can advocate for it.
I would leave it on.
Okay. And the next 3 items were funded, so they're off, off the list. So we've gone through the capital list, and let's just double check to see if we forgot any of the new ones that we mentioned to add in.
Yeah, the rodent issue had, the concerns around rodents had been mentioned. in
Okay, so
your
that would be
other-
expense, Jane, the rodents, because
Right.
that's not a permanent project.
Right.
So let me just make sure. All the rest, I think we have them because we said we were going to add all the comfort stations in, which we will.
Right.
Is there anywhere we should place them? Do we want to place them right in the middle? Do we want to, put them contiguous to the first one and just bump everything down?
The other thing that I just wanted to, voice and share is that, we're putting the comfort stations as individual items, but a lot of those sewer repairs are remaining in one item. And, I don't know which is the better tactic to take, because it was mentioned that it might get more priority if it was separated when it came to the comfort stations. So if that should also apply to the sewers. We did separate the 10th Avenue, which seems to be the most glaring need. And I'm glad that we're able to lift it. But I just am, equally concerned about the others. And I don't know if any of the other committee members wanted to share their thoughts on that.
Henry?
Well,
Henry's?
Maybe it might make sense at least to break them up a little bit into sort of areas that are near each other. Because say rehabbing Colonial Road and Narrows Avenue together might be more feasible than also throwing in, 65th Street and 13th Avenue. So
Separate as we did with trench restorations, you mean Bay Ridge and Ziker Heights?
Yes.
Geographic areas. We could do that. Dean?
I don't know if this even applies anymore, but typically we say it's our top 10 or 12 items that are really looked at. But if we look at this, we have numbers 33, 34 that have been funded. So my only concern is if we break out too many things, our top, everything else goes down.
Right.
So, trench restoration, the replacement of sewers, I don't know how likely it is that they're going to do 2 or 3 jobs together, so I don't know.
Well, I think taking out 10th Avenue, making it #1 priority is good. Perhaps we can, as we mentioned, change the language and say we would like DEP to initiate a study because of, ongoing issues at the following locations. And maybe even following that up with a, because it is such a growing issue, following that up this year with, either a meeting or a letter to the commissioner on the flooding. As far as the comfort stations go, I think we could do two with geographic areas. That comfort stations are really important, that they are running and, are, are kept up to date with, things that work and, are refurbished so that they are, that can be utilized by communities who need them, and maybe separate them by geographic areas. I don't know.
I mean, I would suggest that where we have those areas where there are immediate flooding problems, I think that those should be enumerated because, I mean, hearing the stories of what these people are dealing with, on a more frequent basis, I think that, while there is certain language that we use when we put in these requests, initiate study, I think we should just say, this situation needs immediate, remedial action due to floods every time there's heavy rainfall on those items. And I do think that they should be a higher priority. So maybe my suggestion is to make those locations that are flooding actively, maybe make that the first item. Maybe we won't get the full capital, revamp, but maybe they'll at least do something to remedy the situation, at least, in a sort of putting a Band-Aid on it.
Okay, so keeping number one, keeping number one, 10th Avenue, and then perhaps, are you saying make like a 2, 3, and 4, or are you saying leave number 4 but make it stronger in language? Maybe a 4 and a 5 by geographic area.
Yeah, I don't know the data on those, as Lori said, like,
Okay,
if
I
they're
think
experiencing the same, if they're experiencing the same thing of what we heard from the homeowners on 10th Avenue, they deserve to be elevated as well. The homeowners from 10th Avenue really made their case, and they shared their experiences, and it was very impactful to everyone who heard them. And I don't know the specific data around all those locations, but as Lori said, there may be priorities within that list. And as Henry said, it might be prioritized in geographical zones. So those are two things to consider.
Okay, so I can share that Narrows and Colonial Road each year, we do get, we do hear from those residents. I would say the loudest voices and the greatest number of people with stories of, significant damage and recurring sewage in their homes has been 10th Avenue by far. Backups, yes, on Narrows and Colonial, and then I would also add 81st Street. Which we
Right.
said we would add here, 81st Street between 4th and 6th Avenue.
But I also think I agree with Lori that we need to change the phrasing. We don't want to study, we want action.
Right. I agree. Okay.
And Josephine, just going back 1 minute regarding the rodents, I seem to feel that like in other budget priorities that we had, we did have something about, pest maintenance or.
Yeah,
when we would have-
that's the next list, expense list.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the
It'll go
expense.
on that one then.
We'll go on that after we finish this.
Got it.
Okay, so then I will revise this list, plug in the numbers, and then email the committee.
Okay.
And then if there are any, changes, I guess we could talk about that on the, emails, if there are any changes and corrections, and then we'll email it to the board in advance of the October board meeting. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I am going to take this down. Take that down. And we will go to expense.
Right, see, it's because I don't have the yellow and blue papers. That's why I
I
got
know,
confused. I'm
you know,
sorry.
they came out funny when they were scanned. This is yellow, this is the yellow sheet. So each year, our number one expense priority has been to maintain funding to community boards. We're very parochial. Most boards in the city have listed as their number one. Second has been increased patrol strength at the 68th precinct, as well as civilian personnel levels. Number three is the fire department. Number four is crossing guards. Oh, Laura, you have your hands up. I'm sorry.
I do. I would like to raise an issue. I'm not sure if it goes in the same line item as police department and their personnel. But the schools are having a problem. Fort Hamilton High School specifically that I know about is having a problem with the school safety agents because, as you know, that pool is used by many community groups, CYO, the alumni. I mean, I don't even know who else. And they are having problems staffing the pool with school safety agents, throughout, the pool. I think they swim there till, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, because it is really one of the only pools in the area. And they have actually had to cancel programs. Even some of the CYOs that swim later, there's times when they just can't, they're saying, Fort Hamilton is saying they won't be able to have practice because the staff, they don't have the staff. So if you get somebody who comes in at 8, whatever time, 7 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to stay till 10 o'clock at night, and they don't have the staffing to cover it. So I'm wondering if, I don't know where that goes in, if it's police department or DOE or whomever, but, they're saying this is all part and parcel of their hiring issues.
Yes, I think that is
hiring issues, but
right.
I mean, this is, I think, something that needs to be addressed. This is really, although it is a school, it's a community facility, and that's one example. I'm sure it's overflowing into other areas as well.
Yes, I think there was a point where that funding was going to be moved from the police department to DOE, but Mayor Adams has changed that so that it's going to stay with the police department as the agency. My understanding that, I think you're right, I do know about the issue at Fort Hamilton. I think that it is funded, but they're having that same vacancy issue. I'll just double check quickly. I know there's 2 hands raised. Diane and Chris?
Mine is very simple. Request expense number 3, provide more firefighters. I'd like to change that instead of or. I'd like to make that an and EMS workers.
Okay, so that's great. Diane, that's a cookie cutter field that pops up. So I can't change that. So
can we at least elaborate somewhat in the
yes, in the
explanation?
explanation, right? I could change the explanation. I can't change the request.
Okay.
Yes, so yes, I will do that. So it says the explanation, maintain personnel fundings for firefighting and EMS staffing. Funding levels must be sustained to maintain effective firefighting, EMS services, fire prevention services, and to overcome attrition. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just, when it's presented either or, I mean, that's very poor.
Yeah, you know what? I see exactly what you're saying. I will bring that up to the department, not the department, the Office of Management and Budget and Department of City Planning, who designs this computer software, because you kind of like drag down items. I see what you're saying. I agree. Okay.
Thank you.
I would like to see number 4 moved up to number 2.
Crossing guards, school crossing guards. Okay.
Crossing guards are
Yeah, I agree.
really, really.
Okay.
Can they put that in with the police? Because they fall under the police department.
You know what? We used to have that at one point, and then we separated out just to highlight the significant
The need.
difference in the requests.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'll continue.
You know,
So-
moving
Yes.
that up, in my heart, I agree with it, but I just have, you know, can we truly say we want a school crossing guard above a police officer or above a firefighter? I'm not so sure that that's the.
Yeah,
prudent
I agree,
thing to
Dean.
say. You know, I think leaving
Well,
it
if
at
I
number
knew what-
4, I think is fine. In my heart, I'd like to make it number 1 because we're really getting the business, but I think 4 is probably the appropriate place for it.
Well, I'm having been in the precinct and seeing the number of officers who are just hanging around and wishing I would hear from my community patrol officer when he's having meetings the day before, not 20 minutes before. I think there's some management issues at the precinct that could be dealt with that would improve personnel performance.
Henry?
Well, I was just thinking that crossing guards are one of those things that we probably have a better chance of actually fighting for. I think that the staffing of the police precincts, the staffing of the firehouses, that's, you know, something that's kind of going to happen with or without us to a certain extent, and having it high on the list lets them know that we're serious about it. But crossing guards feels more, maybe it will, maybe it won't. And if we fight harder for it, maybe we have a better chance of actually getting it done.
And I know that my request is, you know, a little bit jaded, but if you could put in the explanation that pre-K buildings should also have crossing guards as well. You know, so it's not only the deficit of the 8 within the district, but the fact that we have 11 other sites that do not have crossing guards.
So we're asking for
that's a-
11 additional sites to be included.
Yes,
Right,
thank you.
okay. So, I don't know, maybe there's a way, maybe, you know, we want to consider merging the police department issues to uniform personnel, school crossing guards, and the safety agents at schools. Do you think that's, no, not good, keeping them separate? Okay.
No.
Well, they
Keep them
all fall
separate.
under the police department. The police department is the lead agency for those sub-agencies.
Those 3, yes, that is true.
So it should fall under 2 for the police department
Yeah,
with those sub-agencies incorporated in it.
right. The problem,
Yeah, I know.
I have to, yeah, I think I have to look too,
Mm.
because you see how those requests, there are like options that you pick from.
Mhm.
So I'm
They are uniformed. I mean, the crossing guards do have to wear a uniform.
yeah,
Yeah, but if we never increased one uniformed officer, we could hire additional school crossing guards. So they're, I mean, they're under the police department, but it's completely separate.
Mhm.
I agree.
okay, so are we leaving as is, and we're adding the school,
Right, can you scroll it up so that we can see the language under your explanation? Thank you so much.
yes.
Mhm.
So several new schools have opened and many more are planned, with 4 new schools scheduled to open September of 23. This year, an important school crossing guard post was removed at Ovington and 7th area southbound, 1 of 6 vacancies, leaving many parents very concerned. There are now 8 vacancies.
Right.
And
And
you know that there was a death many years ago. There was a death of a child at that crossing. Well, it was actually not the Ovington, but the 71st Street, the bridge. There was a child that was killed there.
Yes.
And
And
though
wasn't
we
there a
have-
serious accident at Ovington recently, Josephine?
Yes, this summer there was a pedestrian fatality at Ovington and 7th.
we say 1 of 6 vacancies, aren't there 8 vacancies?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is last year's, Dean.
No, I know, so I'm saying that we could correct that, make it.
Oh, yeah,
8.
yes, I marked that, yes. Stephanie?
In past years, when there have been more police officers, has there been a correlation with greater safety on the streets in terms of traffic alone? I'm still struggling with whether or not to put crossing guards above police, and just wondering if there is any, again, correlation between having a larger force and greater enforcement, even traffic enforcement, and if that would make a difference in, yes, we still need crossing guards, but what does the traffic situation look like on the streets? I've seen crossing guards last year when my son was at Lutheran Elementary School. The crossing guards were afraid to deal with some of the traffic issues that were happening, and they asked me to report some of the incidents that happened. So is there any correlation? Do you have any of that information?
You know, I don't have that specific information. I could tell you just anecdotally. I think it was last year and the year before, when a crossing guard was out, a police officer was assigned to certain difficult situations, but because of staffing, that no longer is the case. I do know that an additional post was added to Ovington and Fourth to address just the volume between Lutheran Elementary and IS 30, as well as the satellite across the street, 3 schools within 1 block. So the volume of young people walking, and also to the new school down the northern end on 4th Avenue and 60th Street. So I don't know that granular data. I'm not really sure if, you know, local police officers in the precinct tend to respond to 911 jobs, 311 jobs, not so much traffic control. We have traffic enforcement, unless there's an emergency, you know, a traffic light that's out, an officer may be dispatched. But I wouldn't say that's really a regular assignment for police officers within the precinct. So they really do rely upon the school crossing guards to do that. And if there's high volume days, you know, we have traffic enforcement, you'll see them, say, when there's a capital construction project that has a big traffic impact, or if there's an event on the Verrazano Bridge or the cantilever and the on the BQE to the north, which, you know, if on either end, if something happens, we're gridlock, and sometimes we'll get a traffic enforcement agent. But does that answer your question a little bit?
A little bit, I guess, you know, I was looking for maybe a larger correlation, whether or not it's probably a question you cannot answer, just in terms of enforcement in general.
Right.
And that's, I think, maybe a larger question, a larger
Yeah.
issue.
I could probably ask that. I'll see, you know, and see if.
But what is the question, Stephanie?
If greater enforcement on the streets, whether regardless if it's traffic or other, but if we have more police officers working, would that diminish a lot of these traffic incidents or dangerous situations that are happening? It might not be local or immediate, but more broadly over time. If in the past there's been any correlation with greater police presence and less traffic situations at schools. There are a lot of variables that are involved with that, because we have more schools, we have more cars, and we have more people. So maybe it's, you know, you can't give me a straight answer on that one.
I don't know if there is, but at one time, the police department, let's say between 3 o'clock and 3:30, that's the dismissal time. If there were 4 cars working, 1 car would be assigned to put themselves out of service at a particular school and leave 3 cars to pick up the normal jobs. I don't know if they do that anymore. I don't know if it's practical, but we used to do that. Specifically in the afternoon, not the mornings, because they're coming, you know,
Right.
but in the afternoons, like today, I was passing Ovington and Fourth. There were 2 school crossing guards there, and you needed both of them there. I could tell you that. It was they were overwhelmed with the number of students, the vehicles, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you both.
Okay. So do we have a decision? Should we leave it as is? I mean, our top 10 are most important. Maybe I could strengthen the language of the crossing guards to really make it compelling to the issue that we're dealing with right now, and how imperative it is because we have such a large vacancy at you know.
I think that's the way to go.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so let's move along then. Oh, okay, number 5. So this request is traffic enforcement agents, support for increased funding for traffic enforcement officers in keeping with the mayor's Vision Zero initiative. I guess we have to change this. We have a new mayor. I know we have pedestrian safety as a top concern. Additional traffic control agents are needed at high crash and heavily traveled commercial corridors. This includes near the entrance of the BQE to handle Verrazano Bridge disruptions and summer volume, 86th Street at 4th. And 5th, 65th at 6th, 7th, and 8th, Fort Hamilton Parkway, as well as 4th Avenue and Shore Road. And additional agents needed to handle VZ bridge disruptions along the 92nd Street corridor and 86th Street at Gatling Place. So we've put this on the last few years. And honestly, when the Verrazano Bridge is out, we very rarely get, there's so much volume that it's just, it's really tough to deal with. So I don't know how you all feel. I mean, we've put this on the list the last few years, just advocating to make sure we have traffic enforcement should we need them. We have had traffic enforcement sent to us really only during capital construction work that, is impactful, like when they did the 79th Street overpass. And 65th Street when there was construction work done there. And sometimes we are allotted, post-pandemic, now that we have traffic volumes up, occasionally we'll get 65th Street and 8th Avenue and 7th Avenue to deal with volume in the mornings during morning rush.
But do you know what our head count is? I'm looking at what the agency response was. Do we know what the head count for CB10 is?
Yeah,
And
so
whether
we
or
don't,
not-
right, so CB10 doesn't have, it's a central, it is a central allotment. I could probably get that number. It's a citywide allotment and they're dispatched according to need.
And they have vacancies, so, I
Yes,
don't know. I
I
don't
think
think
that's another agency that has the vacancies that they're having a hard time filling.
And if they fill them, they're all going to Manhattan. Don't worry
Right.
about that.
yeah, I would take that
So-
off.
Okay, that's fine. So moving along. Home delivered meals. Bay Ridge Center is our home meal provider. They serve 600 homebound seniors. I think they're about up to 650. And so I think they've identified this as a continued need and continued advocacy. So I guess we could leave this here, right? Unless we hear
Mhm.
anything else.
Oh, yeah.
More frequent litter basket collection. So this did get a positive response this year from the mayor's office with more litter basket collection, and our council member, Justin Brannon, did a lot funding for additional basket collection. But I think we need to keep this here because it's so important. We can't lose sight of, we need extra basket collection and MLP staffing. Diane, I'm sorry.
Why do they say it's not a budget item, budget request?
I don't know why they say that. I have no idea. It absolutely is a budget, it's a budget. It's definitely a budget request. It was discussed today at budget consultations as well. There was a lot of advocacy from boards saying that they would like to see MLP funding baseline instead of relying upon the elected officials locally for additional funds, from their discretionary budgets, which we're fortunate right now to be getting that. But additional funds were added, but not enough to cover what we need. We could always use more, but I'm happy that we have a restoration because there was a time where we only had, maybe 1 day a week. We now have 2 to 4 days a week MLP service. Okay. Forestry appropriations for tree pruning, removal and maintenance, including stump removal. I mean, this is a big issue. We need to advocate for funding for tree pruning and maintenance. Henry?
Yeah, I was going to say because at least at the moment we have extra funding for trash can collection that even if it's important to continue to advocate for that, maybe we move it down so that we can push things like tree pruning, which there have been so many complaints about, so we can push that up.
Great idea. I like that. Okay. And the next, another need, Department of Health, staffing for rodent inspections and baiting services, increased staffing for, during the height of the pandemic, Department of Health suspended all rodent inspections and baiting. As a result, CD 10 experienced a sharp increase of rat sightings and infestations, no longer limited to vacant lots and along highways as in the past. Rat infestations are now reported along large sections of residential blocks and on commercial strips. And from last year, it's gotten worse. So we may want to move that up and
We
then,
move it up.
yeah, move that up too, and that sanitation down. Okay. Okay, CB10, CB10 has only one gardener to service the entire district's 352 0.5 acres of parkland.
0 gardeners.
So we could change that now to 0. Okay, and that will go up too once we move everything up.
Could we maybe tweak the language on that one just to address the agency response? That maybe aside from getting a gardener, they need to increase the head count to be able to hire more staff.
Okay. Okay, so I'll put that language, OMB would need to allow for an increase in the agency's headcount. Well, now we have 0. Oh, okay, so I'll add that into OMB must increase the agency's headcount to allow for gardeners in CB10. Is that okay, Henry? Okay. Okay, seem to skip a page. Next priority, inspectors are needed to address the growing number of complaints from area residents on illegal conversions. Year after year, the number of complaints from area residents of single and 2-family homes being converted and occupied as SROs and transient housing is on the rise. So this number has remained pretty constant at about 400 complaints, in that range each year. So do we want to keep this on? For more,
Yeah.
maybe I could tighten it up. Department of Building Inspectors. Okay. Next is library hours, increased funding to keep library branches open. Additional hours within the boundaries of Community District 10 and purchase additional computers and books. Working people and students need access to libraries when work school day ends. Weekend hours are essential. And BPL supports the project as requested by the community board. However, city funded financial support is necessary to undertake this project. So we'd like to keep this for the libraries.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. 13 is CD10 has recurring improper disposal of household waste, commercial waste, and construction debris. Improper disposal occurs at many MLP locations, including overpasses, pedestrian bridges, park perimeters, etc. In addition, DSNY enforcement is needed to address stoop line and sidewalk obstruction violations after hours and on the weekend. It said that here, funding this expense item requests an FY23, but at this time, the availability of funds is uncertain. So shall we keep this? Still a problem.
Yes.
Okay. Next is increase personnel to keep park restrooms open beyond 3 p.m. So we mentioned this earlier. This, has been on the list for some time. Reduce mosquito populations by increasing funding for mosquito control. I think we had one this year, mosquito spraying event for West Nile. It's still a concern and an issue.
Yes, please keep it.
Yes. Next is funds to support 6 playground associates who provide maintenance and rec programs at McKinley Park, Daika Beach Park, Shorewood Park, at 79th Street, JJ Carty, Alice Head Skate Park, and Leif Erikson Park.
Yes.
Okay. Increase PS funding to hire additional maintenance operations staff to do road and abatement. I think we're gonna make this language stronger this year because of so many complaints we've received specific to parks. If that's okay,
Yeah.
okay? Next is canine enforcement requests, number 18, still a problem. We get this request all the time. Number 19 is increased PS funding allocations to expand parks enforcement patrols and security services. Still an issue, as we know, from meetings we had last session. Number 20 is provide more public art. Murals and artwork are add to public spaces. Recently, mural work at Russell Peterson Playground, the overpass at Fort Hamilton Parkway and 62nd Street promised to deter graffiti and beautify both areas. Funding is needed to expand such efforts. I think that's still a positive issue. And then I think there's one more. Provide funds for the newly created Department of Community and Worker, Department of Consumer and Worker Protection Vending Enforcement Personnel. The mayor removed NYPD from vendor enforcement. A new law was passed to create a street vendor enforcement unit. And this really hasn't been fully funded yet. So I would say it's still current. Dean?
Yeah, I want to follow up with what Henry said before. There's a number of line items where the response is, in addition to funding, we don't have the head count. So I'm reading that to mean, even if you give us more dollars, we don't have enough people to do the job.
Right.
So I would suggest wherever that wording is, that we put in, as Henry said on one of them, increase the head count, blah, blah,
Got it.
blah.
Done. Okay,
Okay.
will do. Okay, well, that concludes our list. Let me see if I missed anything. I don't think we did. I think we covered it all. Yes, we are done.
Okay.
Every item was checked off. Dean. Yay. And it's only 9:03.
Josephine, with the one about the school crossing guards, was there accident data to add into that piece in your explanation? Because you mentioned that there, at the location, as Diane said, by where there was a crossing guard missing, that there was an accident, a loss of life over the summer.
Yeah, right. So I will add that to that.
Right. And most of our schools are on commercial corridors here in Community Board 10, which also increases the traffic
Yes.
around those streets.
You know, it's so important. It really is. You know, and I did speak to the inspector of the precinct, you know, and it's tough, you know, when you're down 8, where do you, assign, reassign, and you know, it's tough. And I think those concerns need to be verbalized in the explanation for sure. So I'll definitely add, if I could get additional data, I will put that in as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they should, I remember when I was at PS 170, and we were short crossing guards there.
Mhm.
You know, we made a pitch to all the PTAs, if there were any individuals who just wanted a short, kind of a few hours a day working as the crossing guard. We were successful in getting one, but maybe an outreach, and I don't know if the precinct can do this, if they can, make an outreach to PTAs. There might be families out there that, because you're there in the morning, you go home, you come back at lunchtime, you go home, and you come back at 3 o'clock and then go home. So you still have a lot of flexibility within that workday.
Maybe it's something that the precinct can share with our superintendent's office I'm thinking of like Bill Chin and Sylvia, who can then distribute to all of their schools.
Yeah,
And that might be a great way to share it.
Yeah.
But I think the issue that Josephine raised earlier, the parallel between what happened with the lifeguards and the need to change some of, they made being a lifeguard more attractive financially and with other benefits. They should do the same thing with school crossing guards
Mhm.
and look at other similar issues that's them.
So maybe the explanation should deal with that as well as a possibility to entice additional candidates, that the wages, the hourly rate or whatever it is, and the benefits are increased.
Okay, perfect. Will do. Okay.
All right.
All right, team, it's 9:06. You did a great job.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you. So then, Josephine, do we have to get a motion to adjourn our
Yes.
meeting this
Yes,
evening?
I think our parliamentarian would
I'm
agree.
seeing
Okay,
party
all right, I
hands
see everyone.
going up.
All right, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.